Hey there, welcome to Pickled Parables. This podcast is presented by Parable Ministries as a Bible teaching resource. Thank you for joining us. Pickled Parables is a podcast about taking in and living out the Bible. Here we will study, contemplate, and testify to the Bible's incredible teachings and how it leads us to live better lives. To stay up to date with all things Parable, follow us on Instagram at parable_ministries and visit our website at parableministries.com. We hope today's message finds you well.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to Pickled Parables. This is another one of our Pickled Chats, and we are going to be continuing in our Denominations discussion today. I'm joined again by Jesse Turkington. Jesse, how are you?
Hey, Hunter. Yeah, I'm doing well.
Good. Just peek, little upfront peek behind the curtain. Jesse and I just recorded for an hour talking about Noah, which is an episode that you probably heard last month. So, you know, if you're like, oh man, it feels like they didn't just start talking, that's because we didn't. But today, in our journey down denominations, I'm going to kind of let Jesse introduce maybe why we're talking about denominations, because a lot of it comes from work that he has done and has been doing. And I'll also let him introduce who we are going to be talking about this week.
Yeah, I started this little study out of a request from someone I've never met before on TikTok. They wanted to know, I forget what denomination they wanted to know about, but they wanted to know about a specific denomination. And at the time, I was trying to think of stuff to do on TikTok for Parable. And I was like, you know what? I will look into that and make a video about that for you. And that has started a long, I don't know how long it's been, years-long journey now of looking, at least, of learning about visiting different churches and denominations and stuff. And I'm actively putting together a kind of a report now. It's grown out of just a few or handful of TikTok videos into now a full-length paper that I will probably share with you all on Pickled Parables at some point, maybe next year.
Let's go.
I'm still putting it together, but it's as I continue to look at it more, the more I look at the different denominations, I keep changing my wording and I keep learning new things. But as of right now, it's being titled Christian Branches, Denominations, and Cults, because that's what Christianity is. It's a big mound of people trying to believe the same thing but arguing. So anyhow, today,
some of them have a greater degree of success in that than others, as we have seen on these conversations.
Yeah, we did spend 3 episodes on a specific group. But this time, we're talking about Old Faithful, also known as the Baptists.
Old Faithful, yes. Yeah. So, Jesse, one of the things that we do in kind of getting into these denominations is we share a little bit about, like, what has your interactions been with Baptists? So I'm going to let you go first as far as, like, you know, what's your Baptist interactions been? Yeah.
For context, I know listeners, if you've listened to the other episodes, you know this, but for those who haven't heard yet, I grew up in a non-denominational church. I wasn't a part of a church that had connections to any other churches. And
there could be nothing more Baptist than that, though, Jesse.
Yeah, we'll get there. They have a loose association. I started at, when I was very young, I think it was essentially a Wesleyan non-Baptist church. It fell apart. They had problems. They couldn't agree on hell or something. I don't actually know. And then I moved and I went to a different non-denominational church. It was, I think it was Mennonite, and then it grew out of that and then just moved itself out of that name. And but that was the roots, I think. So Baptists, they're always around. There's a lot of Baptists in the United States, and I bumped into many, all great people, great interactions. But out of all the other denominations, I mean, if you think like Lutheranism, they have such a structured liturgical service. It feels so different, if you're used to going to a really relaxed non-denominational church. Baptist felt the closest to home for me. As a kid in high school growing up, sometimes I would go visit other different youth groups and such, or a different church, and they always felt the most comfortable for me in regards to what I already knew. So the Baptists were really easy for me to get along with. We never seemed to have differences in beliefs. In fact, I didn't even know what the difference was between a Baptist and whatever I was. But
Whatever you were.
I don't know. But yeah, I have good views about Baptists. All the Baptists I have met, I've gotten along really well with. In fact, we've had really good discussions about theology often.
Yeah.
But that's pretty much sums up my experience with Baptists.
So my experience was also non-denominational, non-denom, growing up in community churches. But
Yeah.
and I knew of Baptists, but again, like being in Awana, like we would go to Awana training convention. My parents would go and I would attend and play Pokemon on my Game Boy while they did the Awana trainings and such. But they were always at a big Baptist church in one of the big towns nearby where I grew up. I grew up in the middle of nowhere in Montana. And so like you'd have to travel 2 hours to this place and then you'd go to the convention at the Baptist church. Yeah. Rural Montana life is different than rural Oregon life. Anyway, but I knew they existed, and in my brain, they were always kind of bigger, which I know is not the case, but that's what I thought. And then we actually attended a Baptist church for a year. I was in 4th grade, and the only thing I remember from that Baptist church, and I tried to look up the name of it while you were introing, I believe it was Temple Baptist Church of Great Falls. I'm not sure if that's the one. There's a handful of Baptist churches. As you said, there seems to be a Baptist church not far from everyone. But the thing that I remember from that church was that they were King James only. And the way I came to understand that was when I went there for Awana primarily. And when I got there, I had my New King James or NIV, whatever version of my Awana book I had. And I remember that they wanted me to get a new one because I needed a King James version Awana book, which I was like, okay, these verses are harder to memorize. Why did we do this? But okay, whatever. But I remember it being nice. I remember like the adults being cool. But then my mom took a job and we found another non-denominational church, which actually turned out to be a Reformed church in disguise. And that was it's the pipeline. No, but that was where I kind of went to church with my parents until I left to go to Corbin out here in Oregon. But I had some family members who were Southern Baptist. I don't know as if they were part of the Southern Baptist Convention. I say Southern Baptist because they're from the South and they are Baptist. But I know that their churches were King James only. And so a lot in my brain was like, to be Baptist means that you're King James only as a kid. Sure. That's kind of what, But other than that, as you said, interacting, I didn't know like a lot of kids that identified as like, oh, I'm a Baptist. They just said like, oh yeah, I'm a Christian. Whereas I found, and we kind of discussed this more when we talked about Lutheranism, I found people would say, no, I'm Lutheran. And they would make the distinction. Whereas Baptists, they didn't seem to care. It was just like, no, I'm a Christian. I believe in Jesus. And then you actually, to find out like, oh, what is your faith tradition? You had to dig. And middle high schooler, I wasn't digging. It was just like, cool, me too. And then you move on. It wasn't until I came out to Corbin, I went to, and again, it's just reinforcing the stereotype in my brain. I went to a very large Baptist church in Salem. And I can't really speak to the quality of the church. I assume it's of good quality because it continues. I assume people hear the gospel there, but it was a mega church, for lack of a better way of saying it. And I wanted nothing to do with mega church. And so it was just weird to me that Baptist and mega church overlapped, but it did. And it was strange to me, but yeah. And then shortly thereafter, I found EBC Salem, which was non-denom again. And yeah, which is, I don't know if I ever told you the story. The way I found EBC was I wasn't going to church for a bit, and I was like, I'll just listen to old sermons online of my pastor at the non-denom turned Reformed church in Montana. And it was Emmanuel Bible Church. So I just Googled Emmanuel Bible Church,
Oh,
and the location-based stuff directed my way. Or God. However God works in mysterious location-based services sometimes.
He works with algorithms.
Yes. I mean, we could. Probably does. But anyway, so yeah, my interaction with Baptists, my current pastor is Baptist leaning, like he comes out of a Baptist tradition. And I see that in a lot of his practice on, like, he's very, like, well, we'll get into this when we start talking about what they care about, but it's very, like, individual salvation based, and, like, if you've believed, we should start talking about baptism. And so, those would be the two things. I think he tends less into that. Let's start talking about it more so than others, but I do know some that are like, you've believed, now it's time to get baptized. And Jesse, I'm going to be honest with you. It's such a temptation, and it's going to be so difficult for me to not scream baptize like Nacho Libre.
I know.
During this episode. Yeah, I'm holding back because it is my favorite part of that entire show. And anytime a teenager, like in the youth group, comes, it's like, I think I want to be baptized, I do the thing. It's almost, I almost feel contractually obligated, but I'll try to refrain, mostly because it's very loud.
Okay.
But yeah, that's kind of my interaction with Baptists.
Okay.
Does Baptist, sorry, real quick, when you say the word Baptist, does it, and I want to, listener, if you hear me, I told Jesse before we started recording that I'm pretty much Baptist, like for all intents and purposes, with the handful of things that are not important. But the word Baptist, like the actual word in English when spoken, it sounds like a swear word to me.
Oh, really?
Baptist. It's like, sounds aggressive. At least.
Yeah.
So that's just a me thing.
What's that called? Phonetics?
Phonological. Whatever.
It's just, I can get
just the way a word sounds when you say it. It doesn't have a lot of soft sounds in it. And it's like,
maybe that helps it, because it's, how like the color red and the color blue, red is kind of more aggressive, and so more people like the red, but I mean, at least for teams, when you're talking about sports and stuff, not in life, just like, I like blue. But maybe that Baptist aggressiveness helps in their expansion, because it's just kind of I don't know.
Yeah.
I was just messing.
Yeah. I think it was Greek.
I forgot to add. What were you saying?
I think the word was Greek originally, and I'm just being persnickety. But yeah.
I forgot to add, when I was talking about my experiences with Baptists and Baptist churches, I spent about a year at a Baptist church. I kind of forgot, but it was a really helpful time for me, where I was getting a little frustrated with churches and church leadership and stuff. And I found this Baptist church that was balm for my hurt heart. It genuinely was. It was safe, it was relaxed, and the teaching was always earnest but not overbearing. It was a great experience for me, and that was really helpful in keeping me involved in ministry and Christian stuff. I mean, not that I was going to walk away from the faith, but I really wanted to walk away from the people. I was getting really hurt by that. And so Baptists have been really good to me in helping me heal in a lot of ways like that. So shout out to Silverton First Baptist. You guys were great.
Awesome.
I want to share just a little bit, give context for how big and popular Baptists are in the States, at least. Some famous Baptist pastors throughout history, just to give an idea of the scope. The Prince of Preachers, Charles Spurgeon, was a Baptist. Billy Graham, arguably the biggest, I don't know, in the last...
Revivalist, I think.
Yeah, big name. Martin Luther King Jr. was a Baptist. And Those were just big names. Baptists have had a hand in a lot of mission work, in a lot of social justice, civil rights. They have a lot of work in that, and that's something I think we should recognize, encourage at least. Liberty University used to be called the Lynchburg Baptist College. I don't know if it's Baptist much now, but it's the biggest. Can you guys hear that siren?
Yeah, it lends to the
Nice. I don't know if Liberty University is Baptist now. I don't know. I don't know anyone who goes to Liberty.
My pastor attended. That's where he went to school.
Okay.
And
yeah.
like I said, as far as I know, they're pretty Baptist leaning still.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like the biggest Christian university in the United States, if not the biggest. I don't know.
Yeah.
But those are, just to give context, the biggest Protestant group. So we have Catholics, not Protestant. We have Protestants, lots of umbrellas here. The biggest Protestant group in the United States is the Southern Baptist Convention. It's just the most. You go to Texas, you go to the South, Southern Baptist, they're everywhere. It's a lot there. So I'll hop in, Hunter, into kind of where they started. How far back you want to go? You want to go to...
I'll just make a note. So as Jesse said, this is an umbrella of the Protestant umbrella of Christianity. And so like its DNA is connected to the Protestant Reformation. Martin Luther, we talked about him. So like we're at home underneath Martin Luther and John Calvin and other significant Reformed and Protestant characters. Are you, Jesse, and I want to ask because like, are you going to talk about the Anabaptists at all?
I wasn't really planning on it.
I'm gonna just note, so there is a slight, it's one of those things where it's like, depending on who you ask, Baptists trace their baptismness to various places. There's 4 ideas, and I believe Jesse and I are going to talk about the one primary idea, which is the one that historians and most church history and theologians are like, yeah, this is likely where this stems from. I will note there is a notion that Baptists stem from, I want to find the name of it. It's the Anabaptists, that they're influenced by these Anabaptist people. This was the Dutch Mennonites, which is one of the Anabaptist groups. And Anabaptist means just like baptized again. They were like, the first one didn't stick. We got to be baptized again. But
that was a big deal.
Yes,
that was like punishable by death at the time period. Yeah.
Yes. And the idea was that the Baptists rejected the terms and the phraseology of Anabaptists and how they spoke about baptism. Many of them agreed that their sprinkling or infant baptism was non-efficient or not sufficient, but they rejected that they were unified with this Anabaptist group. And so there's one view that looks like they tore off from them. However, it's hard to say if that is the case or if this is 2 different ideas about baptism that are appearing at the same time. The third view, I know I shared one and called it 2, but we're going to talk about the first one, I think, the most. The third view is mostly like a lot of, especially older Baptist groups hold it. It's that they are successors of the like apostles' baptism movement. The baptisms that we see in the New Testament in the language around that, that's why we are Baptists, because Jesus baptized and the early church baptized, and so we are baptizers as well. And then the third is very similar. It's called the perpetuity view, and this was something that popped up. A Baptist writer coming out of England in like the late 1800s also sought to connect the baptisms of today to the early church baptisms, but that it was a means of perpetuating the filling of the Spirit into modern day. And so like we do today what they did back then to perpetuate the work of God's church. So that is what baptism's role is. Those are 3 other views, but I think we're going to be talking about what I have been finding to be called this like cessationist or not cessationist. I got that wrong. What am I trying to say, Jesse? Help me out.
I'm not sure where you're going, honestly.
Separatist. I found
Separatist.
it.
There
The
it is.
separatist's idea of what baptism is. So if
Okay.
that's kind of where you're started, you can hop in
Okay.
on the separatist
Yeah.
part. Yeah.
Sure. So I think it really started gaining traction with a guy named John Smith. Smith with a Y. It's John Smith.
Not related to that other Smith guy that we spent too long talking about.
Oh, yeah, I forgot that was his name, John Smith. Yeah, this is Smith with a Y. And he wrote a book, which I read some. I looked at it yesterday. It seems to be a collection of arguments. He was really letting some poor guy named Rich Clifton just have it. But it seems to be a collection of arguments and positions. And the title of this book was called The Character of the Beast. He's implying that the sprinkling from the Catholic Church and the practices of that are in line with the Revelation mark of the beast type of thing. He was really going ham chow with why this was a big deal.
Oh, is this like the first time that somebody did that, do we think? Because I know that I, in school, learned about this view of Revelation where, like, the beast is it was Rome, or it could be the corrupt government of whatever. Like, is that where that idea comes from, is him?
Maybe.
Huh, interesting.
I'm sure that, I don't know if he invented it, but I'm sure once the Protestant Reformation started and people found out that they could talk bad things about the Catholic Church and not get killed, man, bad things came out everywhere.
Well, I mean, they might not have got killed, but they would often be chased away from their homes.
That's true.
Let the record show the Catholic Church had no problem with chasing people away from their homes and families.
Yeah. There was a lot of war among Christians. Yeah. So anyhow, he published this book. I think it was 1609 is the publication of the book I read. It's on the Internet Archive if you want to take a look at it for free. So he published his book, and in the same year, he baptized himself, and then he then baptized 36 of his followers.
That feels culty.
Well,
I'm just, calling it for what it is.
Listen, Hunter, we're going to get there when I finish the paper, but a lot of Christian groups start out culty. We'll just say it that way. Anyhow, this doesn't turn into a bad cult because he finds out about a Mennonite group in Amsterdam, and he's like, hey, I want to join them. I want to have union with them. And so he does that, and not all of his followers like that. So some leave and go back to London, and he goes to Amsterdam and kind of disappears into history. He just goes into the Mennonites. So the new guy that comes out of this group taking the stuff from John Smith, his name was Thomas Helwys, I think is how you pronounce it.
Yeah, I think that's right.
So he was a follower of Smith. He left, and he established the first General Baptist congregation back in London around 1611, 1612. Immediately, pretty much, he was imprisoned for advocating universal religious tolerance and the independence of the church from state control. Those were the two big things that he was advocating for, and he got put in prison real quick.
I bet that didn't go over well in the Anglican world of England at that time.
Yeah. So Baptist beliefs stayed alive despite the persecution. Interesting how that happens often. In 1638, a group of congregants from a non-separatist church, I'll explain the separatist, non-separatist thing in a second, but they left, I forget what denomination, they left and they went under the leadership of John Spilsbury.
Oh, he was Calvinist.
That was pretty, yes, he was.
Yes.
And he formed the first particular Baptist church. So separatist and non-separatist refers to the English separation of churches from the Church of England. The separatists didn't want to have anything to do with the Church of England. Wait, did I say that right? The separatists wanted nothing to do. The non-separatists,
Yep.
that's right. The non-separatists were willing to continue having some form of relationship. The Church of England didn't like them leaving. They all were separating, but that's how history has recorded them, is the separatists who wanted nothing to do with them and the non-separatists who were willing to have something to do with them.
Interesting.
So we then have these two branches. We have the General Baptists and the Particular Baptists. And as I understand it, the General Baptists were more influenced by Arminius and the free will doctrine, and the Particular Baptists leaned more into Calvin. They were more about the election. Jesus died for the elect and stuff like that. So those were the two groups that grew during 1940 to the 60s, 1660. The Baptist groups experienced really good growth. They grew a lot. So in that time, well, actually it was after that time, a new group formed in the 1700s, so after this time, and they were Wesleyan in theology.
Wesley!
Which is different from Arminius and Calvin. He's a different person. In fact, it was two people. It was brothers. But they eventually got absorbed into the Particular Baptists, the Calvinistic Baptists, and they more or less kind of left. So these two, what do you call them? Chains or there's two groups of Baptists kind of went through history for a long time, including the colonization of the United States and stuff. A lot of Baptists, well, actually, a lot of people became Baptists. They didn't leave as Baptists, but they came here to the United States, and the Baptists had some stuff going on, and a lot of people became Baptists once they were here. So they had some ups and downs with their growth, and then I'm getting into the 1800s, Hunter. Is there anything you want to add before I go?
A couple stops I want to make along what you just shared. The first is that idea of like the general versus particular. I want to note that is the nature of Calvinist teaching, is it is particular in nature. Like any denomination that hails or claims Reformed is a big part of this, like if they give a nod to John Calvin's teaching, they are going to be particular in nature because a particular group was elect. Like that's just how it goes. And so like I think it's interesting that I just think it's interesting that they actually shed the Arminian Calvin as like they could call it Arminian Baptist or Calvinist Baptist. They shed that for like what it was. I found that interesting. The other thing is, and I would have to research this more, but I believe part of the reason, like as the Baptist denomination and that Baptist movement came to America, I believe the reason that it spread was because of persecution. Actually, I believe it was from other Christians. I think it was I think it was Puritans, because those Baptists were not pure enough in what they were doing. But I believe also where the Puritans, and I think many of the Anglicans that came over, which that's almost an oxymoron. But anyway, is they were focused on city centers and like the town hub, where I think Baptists, they were more rural. They were more willing to go out. They got
kicked out of the cities. Yeah, they became rural.
Yeah, and as a result, like they took the gospel and the Baptist flavor of it into those rural settings. But yeah, no, I go ahead and continue. Those were a couple things that as you were talking popped up in my brain.
Yeah, I don't have too much more, but I have a note here of in 1845.
Oh, you want me to talk about this one?
Well, let me share it and then you can take it. 1845. So this is leading up to the Civil War, the American Civil War. And during this time period, there was a lot of discussion about state rights, which involved slavery. And the Southern Baptist Convention became founded in Augusta, Georgia, in 1845. As a result of these discussions and Baptists split, there became the Northern Baptist Convention. It ended up changing its name to something Baptist
I think it's
Alliance.
the American Baptist Convention now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it split between North and South. The North was not for slavery, and the Southern Baptist Convention was pro-slavery. So the final separation, let's see, I wrote something down, let me read it. The final separation between Baptists of South and North was formalized in 1907 by the organization of the Northern Baptist Convention, renamed in 1950 to the American Baptist Convention. And after it was then called the American Baptist Churches of the USA.
Yep.
So that's what I have. I mean, honestly, that's kind of where we're at. Well, okay, hold on. The Southern Baptists have since apologized for their stance on slavery. They did that in 1995. So it was a few hundred, they're a little late, but they did it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like, this is kind of where we're at now. We have the Southern Baptists, which grew a lot, and they are the biggest Protestant Christian denomination in the States. And we have at least two other branches, I guess. I'm not sure what terminology to use, but two other Baptist groups.
Mm-hmm.
But that's kind of where we're at right now.
Yeah. So my understanding, the way that, and I'm sure there's some like hardcore Southern Baptist or American Baptist affiliate out there that might hear this and be like, he's got it so wrong. Let me know. Hunter@parableministries.com. But I believe that the way they think of it is that the American Baptist churches, even though their name is technically newer than the Southern Baptist Convention, that is like the OG. Like that's the one that existed, and the Southern Baptists broke from them over the issue of slavery. That's how, I believe that's how they frame that. Also, there is another that started in the 30s as an independent like Baptist denomination. It's called the General Association of Regular Baptists. So like this is within the last 100 years.
Okay.
And this started because the Northern Baptist Convention, or the American Baptist churches, that one that they would say was the OG, it began to modernize, like the drums got a little too loud. And it resulted in a number of like either ultra-conservative or conservative or fundamentalist churches leaving that Northern Baptist, American Baptist, to form what at the time was called the Baptist Bible Union and was later called the General Association of Regular Baptist Churches. The other thing that's interesting about all three is they all like have a headquarters. They all have publications that are different from one another, all under the term Baptist. And as we get into a little bit about what they believe, I think you can pinpoint like why they exist. I will note it. Yeah, I think we need to get into belief a bit, because those really all bring us up into modernity. I'll go out on a limb just from what I would see and find is that Billy Graham and others like him are of that northern, like I think he has ties to the Southern Baptist, but I think this is one of the things that was levied against him was that his tactics leaned more towards that American Baptist, where his registration is with the SBC, but his habits are not as much what you would normally see out of the SBC.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of the criticism that's levied by them. I have my own criticisms, but that we're not here to talk about Billy Graham. That's a podcast for another day. But do you want me to kind of begin?
Yeah, we'll trade off.
Yeah. So
I have 6, but I'll let you do however many you have.
Did you do the Baptist thing? Did you do the Baptist? Okay. I'm not going to do. I'll let you do the Baptist thing, and you can even interject if you want to be like, that's actually, Jesse, share the Baptist thing. I think it's a good launching point.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Number one, Baptists usually agree that the supreme authority of the Bible.
And listener, just so you know, when I say the Baptist thing, they have made a nice little like acronym, like acrostic. You know how in school they make you take your name and it's like HUNTER and you have to think of a word for every letter? They did that for Baptist. Pretty clever. So go ahead, Jesse.
You're going to have to spell that out for me because I
Yeah,
did not.
so you just did B, biblical authority.
Okay.
Yep.
Sweet. You're going to have to spell it out for me. So the supreme authority of the Bible in all matters of faith and practice, Baptists seem to be a non-creedal people, and their ultimate appeal always has been to the scriptures rather than to any written confession of faith. And with that, I think that goes to what you were mentioning, Hunter, where it's not like a Calvinistic Baptist or Arminius Baptist. I think they try to avoid giving too much authority to human people. I think they go to the scriptures a lot. So that's the first one I have. The second one is believers' baptism. Why can't I not say that word? Baptism. Believers' baptism.
So that's their S.
S. But that's not. It's a B.
Well, you go ahead, and then I'll lay them all out in the word Baptist for you. It's fun.
Okay. A believer's baptism is kind of the hallmark or the mark of a Christian. And if a Christian is a believer in whom faith has been awakened, then baptism rightly administered must be a baptism for believers only. What that means, I think, is no child baptism. The person who gets saved, the individual who gets saved, makes the choice to go get baptized, whether that's an adult, a older version of a kid, someone who is able to verbally and independently confess Christ as their Lord. And they insist on immersion as opposed to the sprinkling.
Yes.
As they So how is that an S?
Saved and baptized church members. S stands for saved
cheated.
and baptized. They cheated.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
The acronym is WILD. That's not even the wildest one.
Okay. There's 6 letters. Yeah.
Mm-mm.
No.
There's 7 and kind of 1.
Oh, I only have 6 points. So you're gonna. Well, have to fill in the rest.
I think your first point was the first 2 on theirs. So.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah, because they have autonomy of the local church as a separate point. Okay. They have biblical authority and autonomy of the local church. So like they're not affiliated. They're they're autonomous.
Okay.
Yep.
Number 3 that I have. Churches are composed of believers only. Baptists reject the idea of a territorial or parish church and insist that a church is composed only of those who have been gathered by Christ and who have placed their trust in him. In this regard, membership of a church is restricted to those who give clear evidence of their Christian faith and experience.
I don't know where that's at on this one. I'm going to be honest about that.
Oh, okay. I might have gotten an extra. Number 4, equality of all Christians in the life of the church. By the doctrine of the priesthood of all believers, Baptists not only understand that the individual Christian may serve as a minister to other members, but also that each church member has equal rights and privileges in determining the affairs of the church. So pastors have special responsibilities, but that only they can do, but they have no unique priestly status.
Yep. That's the P, priesthood of all believers.
Okay. Oh, well, that sounds nice.
That one I think was the most convincing to me so far from what you said.
Okay. Number 5, independence of the local church. So this is
that autonomy. Yeah.
The autonomy one.
Yep.
So I'll shorten this because it's a long paragraph. But by principle, Baptists affirm that a properly constituted congregation is fully equipped to minister Christ and need not derive its authority from any source other than Christ. We'll just let that sit there. Number 6, separation of church and state.
Yep.
From the time of Smith, with a Y, Baptists have insisted that a church must be free to be Christ's church, determining its own life and charting its own course in obedience to Christ without outside interference. Thus, Smith asserted that, quote, "The magistrate is not by virtue of his office to meddle with religion or matters of conscience, to force and compel men to this or that form of religion or doctrine, but to leave Christian religion free to every man's conscience." That.
Yeah.
So that's the 6 I had.
So I'm going to do a quick overview of the Baptist acrostic.
Please do.
And much of them are what you shared. The first is biblical authority, like you said, that the Bible is the chief or sole authority. The second is the autonomy of the local church. That is that the churches exist. I don't have a governing body in Illinois, even though there's a headquarters in Illinois that tells me how my church should be run. A priesthood of all believers, we mentioned that. The T, BAP, T, 2 ordinances, the believer's baptism and Lord's Supper.
Yep, I did mention that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I mostly think that's because it's not that distinct from most other evangelical groups or Protestant groups. Like most Protestant groups are going to hold that. They just listed as one of their. The I is individual soul liberty. So this is the idea that like our evangelism is we're winning souls for Christ.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very individual, personal, saving faith. That language, your personal saving faith, that's a very Baptist tradition. Saved and baptized church membership, that's, as you mentioned, like the church is only made up of saved and baptized church people, which is interesting. That's the one I'm interested in the most about. Like, I totally agree. Like, if your church is going to practice church membership, you should probably have like Christians be members. But like, I think there's definitely people who attend church that have not yet believed that are hopefully hearing the gospel. And I don't know if I would look at them and say, yeah, you're not a part of our church. Now, you might not be a part of the church yet because you haven't put your faith in Jesus Christ, but like, you're here and you're learning. And I don't know. It's maybe I'm splitting hairs, but the other T is 2 offices of the church, the elder and deacon. So
okay.
Yeah. And all of these, I will note, have like a pile of scripture at the end of them. Going back to the first one, that if you're going to say that all of these things are part of what you should be governed and laid out by, you should probably have Bible verses to back it up, which is why their asterisk and their 8th point, which is the S in Baptists, that second S, is the separation of church and state. Interestingly, they don't have a bunch of Bible verses at the end of that one to say that that's a good thing to have. So, I just something that I noticed was different about that separation of church and state part. But yeah, their views, as Jesse said, like Baptists, if you are a Baptist, listen to this. As a Baptist talking about it, you probably heard something in there and you're like, well, I don't know if I believe that exactly how Hunter and Jesse said it. That's kind of the point. Like Baptists have a swath of disagreement about many different things. But if you hold to those core, like biblical authority, the autonomy, the priesthood of believers, if you hold to these, you will probably, if you're not Baptist, you'll at least find yourself at home within the Baptist denomination. Yeah. I don't know if that helped or if that muddied it. They made an acrostic. Yeah. I don't know who came up with this acronym.
What is the acrostic?
It's Baptist. It's BAPTISTS.
Oh, okay. So they just spelled their own name.
Yeah, and then they just like strangely assigned stuff.
Okay.
To the letters. It's probably some sort of.
It's like their version of tulip.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. I got tulip plus. No. Those 7-point Calvinists. They're chuckling to themselves right now.
In regards to what you just said about how you can be a Baptist and have a wide range of belief from another Baptist, we were talking about this before we started recording, but I think there is intentionality behind that. Where I read that quote by Smith about, he was talking specifically about the magistrate and the state interfering with a man's conscience and his belief of religion. When I was reading his book, the what was it called? It's something about the beast. The character of the beast. He talks about that. Of one of his opening lines is like, how strange is it for a man to forsake his religion and gain a new one? And he talks about that a little bit, but he leaves the door open of like, that should be encouraged. You should think through and believe the things you believe. And I think in that, that's why we get Calvinist version of Baptist, we get Arminian version of Baptist. I mean, we still get Wesleyan version of Baptist. And that's not something you find in every denominational group where you can have such wide ability to choose like which version you're going to go with. That also makes it hard to talk about because it's so broad.
Mm-hmm.
You could, like you mentioned, like there are some Baptist churches that only use the King James Version. And there's a lot of other Baptist churches that they don't care. They'll use the NASB, they'll use the ESV, the NLT, like you can get a wide range with Baptists. So I guess, listener, if you have not interacted with Baptists much and you go to visit one after listening to this podcast, please be aware it's not going to be like every other Baptist church.
Yeah. So I think like that's like an overview of what Baptists believe. I think the biggest, it's in the name, the Baptists, is they are pretty set, and just to bear my like whatever, I think they are correct in they do not affirm infant baptism. Like they would say that pedo infant baptism is not baptism. Mostly because if it is believer's baptism, then a baby cannot believe and an infant cannot believe, and so that baptism is not real. That's essentially the argument. And just to also note, like the practice of baptism is set in the New Testament. Like it's not, I don't want it to seem like John Smith baptized himself and it's like he was onto something. He did that because of what he saw and read in Scripture. Now, I'm not sure why he baptized himself. It's like get a brother down there and help you out. But like even Jesus didn't baptize himself. Like, chill out, bud. But we see the early church being baptized and baptizing believers. And it is believers. And the other thing, and this is where I think it's the General Association of Regular Baptists, that smallest group of them in America. They are more like your baptism is a signal that it's not a political statement, but it's like this is, it's a declaration of essentially war against the culture. Like, I belong to Christ and I've been baptized and I am not a part of this and I want everybody to know it. And innately in doing so, like you are, and I will admit, in church history, we do see baptism play that role. There's moments in church history where persecution was so great that, like, to be baptized, I mean, you were probably going to die because you chose to get baptized. And we see other points in church history where Christianity is made the common language, like the state doesn't do a good job of separating from church and state in those instances. And people are just Christian, quote unquote, because it's the hip, cool thing to do, and they'll get a tax break and they'll get whatever from the emperor or the king or who have you. And so those who get baptized are the ones that, like, no, you're in this not just because of political reasons. You're in it because you truly believe it. And so that is where that more of like vetting process of, are you really saved? What's the fruit? That's where that heritage comes from. I tried to look up, like, of the three in America, like, what is the difference of belief in them? The Southern Baptists, so I'm just going to kind of read this and we can, it's not a lot. They're all pretty conservative. However, the Southern Baptist Convention is considered a conservative evangelical. And they assert biblical inerrancy, and this notes like traditional gender roles. That's going to become important here in just a moment. They are big on evangelism, missions, and a conservative social positions. So, like, traditional views of family and the American Baptist churches, which is the Northern Baptist, and this is where, again, I think because Billy Graham was part of that Southern Baptist, but he played a lot in those Northern Baptists, basically got some flack. They're more theologically broad, and they often will be more of the progressive lines of Baptist. So if you have a Baptist church that is like, man, they seem hip and with the times, they might be tending a little more towards that Northern Baptist. They do sometimes, in not many cases, but in some, have a little more laxity on women in ministry, LGBTQ inclusion, and modern day issues. It's rare, but it is more likely in the Northern Baptist Convention. And then the other, the General Assembly, is like the fundamentalist Baptists. These are the fundamentalists. They believe that like we need to separate from the apostasy and lean into biblical inerrancy, and thus reject these essentially where we've strayed. They have strong conservative theological and social positions. They share that with the Southern Baptist Convention. And I also want to note, like, it can be easy for us to read like, oh, the Southern Baptist and Northern Baptist split over the issue of slavery. My understanding is not that many of the Northern Baptists were against slavery. I think many of them were still like pro, if not indifferent to slavery. Rather, the Southern Baptist Convention wanted to ordain and send missionaries who were slaveholders. And the Northern Baptists were like, no, you can't do that. That's not, like, we don't believe that you are correct on this issue. But I also, there were probably Baptist men and maybe some women that did play an influential role in the abolition of slavery. But I also am confident that there were Baptist people in the Northern Baptist umbrella for a lot of America's history that did not differ on slavery until the time of the Civil War. It was like, well, it's a hot button issue. Maybe we should think about this. Do you know what I'm saying? And so you can kind of see that play out in modern day hot button issues where they're further like separating themselves from those things.
Yeah, I'll add too, in the research I was finding about this, a lot of the slaves in the South became Baptists. And that was, I'll be perfectly frank, that was because of subjugation. They got some easier times with the slaveholders if they shared the same faith, or if they did that. Now, it's true that a lot of the African American slaves did find identity with Moses and with the Exodus, and they really gravitated to that part of the Bible story. And because they wanted freedom, and once they got the freedom, and then we enter the whole era of Jim Crow and all the laws of segregation. Baptists were, I believe, if I remember, if I read the right article, Baptist during that time was the biggest denomination among African Americans. Because they lived in it, they found identity in a part of it, even though they were being, to be perfectly blunt, slave owners were using the Bible to justify slavery. So
yeah,
I have a hard time thinking, wow, why would I want to adopt the religion of someone who's using that religion to tell me that I'm less than?
And I want to note, not only were they using that, I think they believed it. Like, I think there's a danger in saying like, oh, they use the Bible to justify, which is true. You are correct in saying that. But in my brain, sometimes I hear that and I go, what a shady, like, I'm not trying to justify that. Slavery is bad. And also, like, in the book of Acts, almost like early on, one of the very first people you see get baptized was a black person. So like, just chill out. So, and also had some different anatomical situations going on that would have outed him in the culture that he was in. But I think these Baptist preachers, they believed it. They were wrong, but they really believed that in Exodus when it says, don't beat the slave to death, that's God's way of telling them that they should own slaves. Again, I think it's wrong, but I think they truly believed that. I don't think they just woke up and were like, we got to figure out a way to make this right. How are we going to, and I think they truly believed it, which is actually even scarier and more dangerous, because when you really believe something, you're going to stick by it. So much so that you might fight a war over it. Yeah. I found a nice little map that helped me.
Okay.
And just to kind of summarize those three again, just to give kind of a wrap that bow up. The early Baptists, it was just U.S. Baptists until 1845, where they split over the problem with slavery. Northern Baptists, which were located mostly in the North, in the Union side, disagreed and had different views on who could be ordained and Southern Baptists, that was the split. And then it was the Southern Baptists and the Northern Baptists until 1907, where they became the American Baptist churches. And then 25 years later, the General Assembly split off of the North again. So the North has had two things where it's kicked off. This time, those more conservatives split from the North because of leanings toward more liberal theology in the Northern Baptist Convention, the AB, the American Baptist churches. I think for the most part, people today, when they interact with a Baptist, as you noted, it's the biggest one. It's that Southern Baptist tradition. And as you also noted, that tradition it was a long time coming and probably definitely more time overdue. They have denounced that, they've pretty much admitted, yeah, we got that part wrong about the whole slavery thing. Which is good.
Yeah.
Would have liked it a bit sooner.
Yeah.
But at least you got there, I suppose, to the point where and this is just, I'm going to just tell the truth. As I look at the three umbrellas of Baptists in the U.S., I would find myself in the Southern Baptist bucket more so than I would have thought. Only because the American Baptist churches, their openness to, I would say, liberal theology is concerning to me. And the General Association, I think this is the spin-off that results in Westboro types, is how I'll put it. If I'm getting that characterization wrong, forgive me, but just looking at they're pretty closed off and unwilling to, the chart, it says women in pastoral prohibited, biblical inerrancy strongly affirmed, cooperation with other denominations, the General Assembly strongly opposed, size of churches, small fellowship on purpose. They're not trying to get big. And if we preach a message that makes people angry and drives them away because it's mean, we're going to chalk it up to, well, that was because they were offended by the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And a small fellowship is actually a testimony to the work that we're doing. Anyway, just to give a little roadmap of Baptists in America today.
Yeah.
That helped me.
I'll jump on that train and I'll add, I have found, this is more observational than any sort of biblical truth coming out right now. But I have found that when trying to be careful with my words, I think.
Editing's a great thing, Jesse. We can do a lot.
Well, but I'll try. I'll try. When people are tight gripped around control, whether that is controlling what the Bible says or controlling people, that tends to produce authoritarianism and dangerous groups, we'll say. When you couple that with the idea that we have the interpretation of Scripture, like we know it. I'm thinking of dispensationalists right now, which is a role that plays a lot in Baptists, I find. Not all Baptists are dispensational. And listener, if you don't know what that is, there's two sides of the coin. There's covenant theology, which focuses on one thing, and there's dispensationalists, which it's a way of interpreting the Bible that people prefer one or the other sometimes. when you have such a quote unquote understanding of the Bible where everything is answered, everything has an answer, you're right. That's what you are feeding yourself. I'm right. And when everything is right, it's really, really, really hard to admit when something's wrong.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I say all of this as a lead up to a fairly recent development within the Southern Baptist Convention, the SBC. On February 10th, 2019, several news outlets released at once a report that found roughly 380 pastors, lay leaders, and volunteers had faced allegations of sexual misconduct, leaving behind over 700 victims, and they had been doing it for over 40 years, since 1990. It was confirmed, this is the worst part, it was confirmed that the leaders of the convention not only knew about the sex abuse, but hushed the victims and moved the violators to different churches with no report to law enforcement or punishment. So this created a network of predators free to roam throughout the convention without fear of consequences. And once they got caught, they found a list in the leadership position. They knew who the bad guys were. And they moved them to different churches to keep them from getting in trouble. And once they got found out, it was, oh, we're so sorry, this was bad. They weren't apologizing because they felt bad. They were apologizing because they got caught. And it's really, really hard. I find I found a lot of examples of this in my research of denominations and Christian branches. When people believe that they are right, that they got it right, it's really hard to admit when something's wrong because you're right. And if that's wrong, then that makes it look like I'm not right. Or if I'm wrong here, that means that this over here could be wrong. It creates cracks when you admit that there could be something wrong when you're supposed to always be right. And that is a very real problem in a lot of Christian denominations where we have the answers. We have it all right. And that's why I advocate for holding the absolutes of the faith, having your convictions that you get convinced of, but also being willing to hold those convictions, not the absolutes, but holding those convictions with an open hand. Because once you start surrounding yourself with the protection of I'm right, you're blinding yourself to the harms you could cause or the harms other people could cause using that rightness, that righteousness you create to other people.
Yeah.
So I'm it's a little tangent, I'm sorry, but I wanted to just say that is a recent thing, that 2019 that happened to the SBC, and they're still having fallout because of that.
Yes. The sentiment you just shared, the idea of being right and struggling to holding secondary and maybe even third tier issues as absolutes, or holding them as secondary but believing in them as hard as absolutes, I think is what Jesus spoke out against when he spoke out against the Pharisees. Like, the Pharisees, they were not the wackos of their day. There was plenty of those. There had zealots running around. That was a group. But like, these would have been the most, this is what Paul was before he was Paul. They were like the common Jewish leader. That was the norm. And Jesus had a lot to say about them being whitewashed tombs, and you're worried about getting cleaned up on the outside, but you got a mess inside. And I think to the Pharisees, they heard that and they went, yeah, but like, you didn't quote God's law or give to the temple today, so you're probably wrong. And so like, this has been a problem forever. You're right. And it was echoing in my brain as you were saying that. So Jesse, do you have anything further to share regarding Baptists? I will say, I want to comment on their covering up of sin. Go, listener, if you're like, man, but like, Go read pretty much any story in the Bible that involves people sinning, and then read what happens when they try to cover that up or not deal with it or not allow God to deal with it. And that to levy against the Southern Baptist Convention, you did not read your inerrant scripture well. And I think it's very unfortunate, it's not unfortunate. It's terrible for all of the victims that are on those lists and put these quote unquote pastors on those lists. They're not pastors if they're doing that, by the way. They're exempt. But it's unfortunate for the churches that are just trying to preach the gospel that have this bad flavor now. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think there's a lot of little congregations that are struggling. That came out, which it should. I'm glad it did. I'm always pro the truth coming out. But then it's like, you let these little congregations down too. This convention, and covering up big names, you've let really the heritage of the Baptist tradition, this rural, like, heart of the U.S. That's where we're at. That's what we're talking about. You let them down. And I think that's unfortunate that I know that there's congregations that I've talked to people that are like, ooh, are you Baptist? Because I heard about what happened with this, that, and the other. And I'm like, well, I'm not, but like non-denominational is just Baptist without the courage to say it.
Yeah.
So like that's...
And we're getting a lot of flack too. I mean, we don't look good either.
It's fine. That's why, Jesse, I stand by this. I'm denominationally homeless. I do not truly, I have not yet. And I think it's probably that individualistic American part of my upbringing of like, I don't agree fully with anyone. I don't know.
At this point in life, I have started calling myself an interdenominationalist.
Interdenominational.
I like it when other denominations work together and can have some kind of relationship, knowing that like, hey, we don't agree on this and this, but we do agree on this, 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 and this. And I love that. I love working with people who have a little bit of different view than me, knowing that we can still agree on really important stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I didn't see, when I read Acts last and when I listened to you read it, I didn't hear a lot of talk about who was in what denomination. I missed that part. There was a little bit about who needed to be circumcised, but they squashed that beef pretty quick. Yeah, Paul yelled at some people. It's pretty funny. Yeah. Dude, okay. Well, we'll end this. I'll tell you why. That's in my brain.
Okay. I'll share just to end. Look, I just shared some pretty heavy stuff about a particular group of Baptists. And I'll say, on top of this, I really like the Baptists I know. A lot of Baptists I know are ashamed because of what has come out of the Southern Baptist Convention. I know a whole church that was like, I don't know if we want the name Baptist anymore. Like, maybe we should become non-denominational, just get rid of that name because of this. It's a shameful thing. And it's something we shouldn't forget, because if we do, it'll just happen again and we'll be surprised. But we need to remember this while also recognizing that it's not every Baptist. It's not every Baptist church. I mean, heck, it wasn't even every Southern Baptist church. I mean, the leadership of that convention allowed it to happen.
Yep.
But not every church in that denomination wanted that or supported that. So it's important to remember that, yeah, their Christianity has this unfortunate way of allowing bad actors to creep into it really easily. It's just something we struggle with, and I don't like that. But it's not every church, it's not every Christian. And there are some genuinely wonderful, beautiful people who have come out of Baptist tradition. And I recognize that. And I just want to say that after saying these tough things about them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's good, and I'm going to echo this by saying, like, Jesse doesn't share that as like a got him. I think you are harder on those you are closer to. And so for that to come out of a faith tradition in a denomination that is very near, if not almost, like Jesse and I said, in our upbringing, we're non-denominational. It's it's pretty much Baptist. Like there's a few tweaks here and there, but like, and so that's why when Jesse and you're like, yeah, that was wrong. That convention blew it. We don't say that from a like to dog on it. It's like when you care for something, you want to make sure it's the best it can be.
It's too close to home.
Yes.
Is what it is for me. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. No, I think that's good. Yeah, this was refreshing. I didn't think we'd have much to talk about because it was like, oh, Baptists.
I know
them.
When I started researching them, I was like, well, I don't actually know that much about them,
And then here we are.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, sweet. Jesse, anything else before I say goodbye and close her down?
No, I'm good. I'm
Perfect.
content.
Perfect. Sweet. Well, listener, thank you so much for being here. Like I said, if you listen to this and if you want to comment, you can send us an email, Jesse at Parable Ministries, Hunter at Parable Ministries. We'll do our best to read and answer those, and or if their podcatcher leaves, do comments. That's fine. We'll try to view those and interact with them. But yeah, thank you for being here, and we will catch you guys next time. Bye now.
See ya.
Thank you for listening to Pickled Parables. If you enjoyed this message, please rate us, subscribe, and share with your friends. If you're interested in more things like this, check out our secondary podcast called My Dusty Bible. To stay up to date with all things Parable, follow us on Instagram at Parable_Ministries and visit our website at parableministries.com. Parable is a volunteer organization, and we would deeply appreciate your prayers. Thank you for joining us today. We'll catch you later.